The United States and China agree to pause tariff hikes for an additional 90 days. President Donald Trump signs executive order just hours before the pause on Trump's tariffs was set to expire. U.S. President Donald Trump confirms meeting with Russian President Putin on Friday, says he will try to get some territory back for Ukraine and also expects increased trade with Russia following a peace deal. Stocks on Wall Street and lower while Asian markets open with gains today morning, tracking the U.S. China trade truce extension. GIFT Nifty, however, is indicating a lower start for the Indian market. Oil prices rise as United States and China extend the pause on higher tariffs, easing concerns of an escalating trade war. Gold prices slips after President Donald Trump says tariffs will not be placed on imported gold bars. And finally, all eyes will be on India's CPI data due today at 4 p.m. as economists polled by CNBC TV 18 expect the print to fall below 2% mark and come in at a multi-year low around 1.5% mark. Hello, good morning. You've tuned into CNBC TV 18 and you're watching Power Breakfast with me, Veni Motiwala. An interesting day that we saw shaping up yesterday, but today the Asian markets have opened up a bit mixed to slight but positive is what we could say. Taiwan index flattish with a positive bias as of now. Hang Seng is managing to see some bit of a decline. In the morning also it was a bit muted. So now the decline has just come in for Hang Seng. That's around 0.2%. But other than that, whether you look at ASX 200, that's the Australian index, that's managing to hold on to gains of 0.2%. We have Nikkei. Yesterday it was shut, the Japanese index, and now today it's opened up with gains of almost 2%. Shanghai is managing to hold on to gains of 0.2% as well. And all this is coming because US and China have given that US has signed an extension now that's come in for the tariffs. So that is what is keeping these markets a bit choked up in trade. Let's look at what the GIFT Nifty is indicating as of now. A bit of a muted start to a decline is what we are watching out for today. 34 points decline is what the Nifty implied open is indicating as of now. So yes, maybe a muted start is what we could watch out for in terms of the Indian markets. But see, that's all the global market action that we have that's come in for y'all overnight. You know, this truce that's come in. Asian markets a bit mixed opening. How is all this going to be impacting our Indian markets is going to be key to watch out for. And for that, we have a team of research joining in with us to set you up in terms of trade, which are the important stocks to watch out for in today's trading session as well. And first up, we have Vamakshi joining in with us to tell us what are the cues that we should keep an eye out on in terms of the market. Good morning, Vamakshi.
Well, good morning, Vinny. You know, yesterday the market closed near the day's highest point. The Nifty rose by almost 222 basis points to 24,585, crossing that crucial 24,500 mark. And, you know, on the way up, the top contributors were HDFC Bank, SBI, as well as L&T. The broader markets, though, slightly underperformed. The Nifty mid-cap was up almost 0.85%, while the small-cap index was up only by around 0.4%. But what's important to note is that all sectoral indices actually ended in the green, and the gains were largely led by PSU banks, realty, AC companies. On the flip side, they declined in yesterday's trading session. Take a look at PG Electroplast, another 14% downtick for the counter. Amber End as well as Voltas were some of the other counters that witnessed some selling pressure in yesterday's trading session. Now, the US markets, it was not such a great day for trade for them because all three indices ended in the red. As far as so the handover that is coming in from the US markets is very weak. As far as today's trading session is concerned, here are some of the important cues that we'll be watching out for. As far as economic cues are concerned, India's CPI data will come later today, as well as the US CPI data. A couple of stocks will be reacting to their numbers as well. This list includes Astral, Praj, Tilaknagar, Som Distilleries as well as Bata, and a lot of stocks yet to report its numbers. ONGC, Hindalco will also be in focus. Keep in mind some defense counters will also be on our radar. Hindustan Aeronautics, Bharat Dynamics as well as Cochin Shipyard. Some new age companies like Honasa, Nykaa as well as Nazara Tech, and Suzlon as well as Viatech, Vabag will be some other counters that will be reporting numbers today. So a whole host of companies reporting its earnings. Nazara Tech, keep in mind, along with the numbers, will also be considering a bonus issue as well as a stock split. Now, let's look at what the GIFT Nifty is also indicating for our Indian markets. It's a start in the red, almost 30 points lower.
Okay, Mamakshi, thank you so much for that. Important cues to watch out for in today's trading session. But which are the important stocks that you should be keeping on your radar? We have Gaurav joining in with us for that. Good morning, Gaurav.
Well, good morning. First, let's talk about Bata, because when we look at profit, that has declined almost by 70% on a year-on-year basis for first quarter, although revenue has remained flattish. On the other hand, Tilak Nagar Industries came up with good set of numbers. Profit has doubled almost. Now it came at around 88.5 crores versus what it was at 40 crores, and revenue also increased almost by 30% on a year-on-year basis. Astral actually came up with big set of numbers, because net profit that has declined almost by 32%. Revenue is down almost by 2% on a year-on-year basis, and we saw some margin compression as well. But on the other hand, let's also talk about Ashok Bilton, because here we saw revenue actually decline almost by 23%, but because of the cost benefits, the profit increased almost by 44% on a year-on-year basis. Travel Food Services, this company is reporting its first quarter after listing, and when we look at the numbers, they were decent numbers. Net profit increased almost by 18% on a year-on-year basis, while revenues, they also increased almost by 12%. On the other hand, let's also talk about KNR Construction, because here we saw net profit declining almost by 28% on a year-on-year basis. Other than that, there are some companies which will be on our radar. First is Pfizer, because company has got an approval for pneumococcal vaccine for adults in the domestic market. Rainbow Childcare is also going to be on our radar today, and the reason being that company is acquiring Pratiksha Hospital in Guwahati, Assam for around 171 crores. And lastly, let's also talk about MediAssist. Now this company is on our radar, and the reason being that there could be a block deal happening where promoter might sell almost 4% of the equity at a cost of around 507 rupees per share, and the total deal size could be up to 560 crores. So definitely watching out on all these counters today.
Absolutely important to watch out all these counters. But let's move on and talk about the AMFI data that came in yesterday, right? Investments into equity mutual funds surged by 81% to a record high of 42,000 crore rupees in the month of July. New fund offers collected over 30,000 crore rupees as well in this month. So it was a good data. But Survi is joining in with us to give us more details on this one and what this data actually indicates. Survi.
The inflows for equity mutual funds have hit a record high, the highest ever level. The net equity inflow in this month of July has been 42,672 crores. That's a huge number, and it has overtaken the previous high, which was last year in Diwali around October, which was around 41,000 crores. So where does all this money come in from? New fund offerings. Over 30 NFOs, and all put together, they have pulled in over 30,400 crores. That's the might of these NFOs. So you'd wonder, what are these new funds? Well, they're across categories. There are lots of thematic funds that have pulled in the money. In fact, 9,000 crores has come in from thematic funds, the likes of HDFC Innovation Fund, ICICI Prudential Active Momentum Fund, and many others. Then there have been new launches in the mid-cap category, in the multi-cap category. For instance, Bajaj Finserv launched their small-cap fund. Franklin India launched their multi-asset fund. And there have been others like the multi-asset allocation, category, where Franklin launched a fund. So all of it put together has pulled in huge amounts of money. That's point number one. If you look at the next sort of interesting trend, it's investors' love for mid and small caps, and that really illustrates the point. Look at that, small cap funds drawing in the highest ever inflows of nearly 6,500 crores. That, is huge in comparison to the 2,100 odd crores that large cap funds have garnered. So clearly the market's preference is towards SMIDs, at least the retail investors. Then let's talk about SIPs. Again, a very heartening figure coming through. The SIP trend is rock steady, and this is also a record high. Last month, June, the number was over 27,000 crores. This month, it's almost 28,500 crores. So even as the market has been sluggish, returns have been tough to come by, investors have been keeping the faith. Last but not the least, an interesting sort of perhaps example of how investors are also getting savvier. They're looking at diversification, asset allocation, which is why this category, which is known as the multi-asset category, this is pulling in more and more money almost on a consistent basis. And this time around, if you look at the multi-asset category, then it's garnered almost 6,200 crores, which is a record high for the multi-asset category as well. All put together, a fantastic month, a month of records when it comes to equity inflows coming into mutual funds.
Okay, Survi, thank you so much for that. A month of records that's come in for equity mutual funds and the flows there. But on that note, we're going to step into a very short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more news flow after the break. Welcome back to Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. Now let's get into the updates that have come in between the United States as well as China. Now the United States and China have extended a tariff truce for another 90 days, preventing triple-digit duties on Chinese goods. Trump announced on his Truth Social platform that he had signed an executive order suspending the imposition of higher tariffs until November 10th, with all other elements of the truce to remain in place, which means current 10% reciprocal tariff remains in effect during this suspension period. The trade talks will continue and both the countries will remain committed to ongoing negotiations to resolve trade disputes and strengthen the economic ties. So that's the update that we have coming in there. But in fact, let's listen in to what President Donald Trump had to say on his relationship with China before signing the executive orders on trade truce extension.
China's been, we've been dealing very nicely with China, as you probably have heard. They have tremendous tariffs that they're paying to the United States of America. And we'll see what happens. They've been dealing quite nicely. The relationship is very good with President Xi and myself.
Now, Freedom Capital Markets' Paul Meeks says that China has a lot of leverage and says that the NVIDIA and AMD deal is essentially a reverse tariff. Listen to what he had to say.
I think China indeed has a lot of leverage because they can reciprocate to the tune that nobody else can. It's interesting to me with the NVIDIA and AMD deal, which I said in my note is essentially a reverse tariff, something unprecedented. I can't recall when this was ever done before, but of course our president lives in that world to keep everybody on their toes. But in that particular deal, NVIDIA and AMD paid the price. So it goes to show you that the Chinese have a lot of leverage and they didn't necessarily succumb. NVIDIA and AMD are so desperate for those revenues because it's such a big market, they are paying the price, which I think is pretty interesting.
And this is going to be an interesting week because Donald Trump is also slated to meet the Russian president in Alaska at the end of the week. Speaking to reporters at the White House, he said that he could know within 2 minutes of meeting Putin whether the progress was possible. Also said that there would be some swapping or changes in land between Russia and Ukraine.
The death is incredible. It's the worst thing that's happened, by far the worst that's happened since World War II. So I'm going in to speak to Vladimir Putin, and I'm going to be telling him, you got to end this war, you got to end it. And he wasn't going to mess with me. This war would have never happened. You know, we had a discussion about it one time, and we never had that discussion again. Would have never happened. There'll be some land swapping going on. I know that through Russia and through conversations with everybody to the good, for the good of Ukraine. Good stuff, not bad stuff. Also, some bad stuff for both.
And let's see what's happened in the U.S. market as well, right? Wall Street, that ended low across major indices as White House officials said that Donald Trump is extending pause of tariffs on China by another 90 days. Now, Dow was down 201 points. S&P 500 fell around 16 points in yesterday's trading session, while Nasdaq was down 65 points. We have CNBC's Bertha Coombs, who's joining in with us to give us a wrap on what happened on Wall Street. Bertha.
U.S. markets were down across the major indexes in Monday trading as White House officials say President Trump is extending the deadline on China tariffs by another 90 days. The Dow tumbling 201 points. The S&P 500 was down 16, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq fell 65 points. American chip-making giants NVIDIA and Advanced Micro Devices have agreed to pay the U.S. government a cut of the revenue they earn from selling AI chips in China. President Trump confirmed the unprecedented agreement on Monday. The two chip makers will receive export licenses to sell certain chips in China in exchange for 15% of their revenue from the sales. The agreement came days after the president said he would implement a 100% tariff on imports of semiconductors and chips unless a company was building in the U.S. And automaker Ford announcing a $5 billion investment today to bring affordable electric vehicles to the market. Ford says the funds will create or secure nearly 4,000 jobs at plants in Louisville, Kentucky, and in Michigan. Calling it its next Model T moment, Ford says the first vehicle will be a four-door midsize electric pickup that will launch in 2027, starting at around $30,000. That's what's happening here in the U.S. Back over to you in Mumbai.
Thank you so much for that. Now shifting focus as the search for new Federal Reserve Chairman heats up, former Fed Vice Chairman Roger Ferguson says that the candidates under consideration understand how FOMC works and adds each candidate will approach the job differently. Listen in.
I find interesting is, with all the talk of change, 4 of the 5 candidates at least understand something about how the FOMC works. And I think it's hard in each case to discern exactly how they're going to perform. The other thing to recognize is, based on some interpretations from the Supreme Court recently, the president's ability to fire any member of the board is limited. There has to be cause, a little different from people who are actually part of the executive branch. And so I think each one of these individuals will approach the job differently. But 4 of them have been in the room before and know a little bit about the culture and the institution. So we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Okay, on that note, we're going to slip into a very short break. But up next, we'll get you what's happening in the world of commodities. Stay tuned in for that. Welcome back to Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. Now we have Manisha Gupta joining with us to give us those updates from the world of commodities. Good morning, Manisha. And a lot that's happened overnight in terms of truce between U.S. and China and some clarifications that came in for the gold front as well in terms of tariff.
Oh, well, absolutely. And both of these factors clearly have led to some stability come back into the markets. I'll start with gold first because we did see an all-time high on Friday. And then on Monday, we heard that there is clarity coming in from the U.S. administration, and the U.S. president has tweeted that gold will not be tariffed. And we've seen further decline coming for the prices. Then 33.50 or thereabouts is how it's trading right now. The easing fears of sharp rise in gold import costs clearly have been done away with, and we're looking at some profit-taking. Profit-taking also coming in as the U.S. has signed an executive order extending pause on the U.S. tariffs for China for another 90 days, and that's exactly the reason that you have seen support come in for many of the industrial commodities. So the gold prices seems to be stabilizing. We've seen metal prices also gain overnight. Steel is trading near 7-month highs. Iron ore futures at around 4-week highs. Aluminum prices have been supportive. And copper, after that very sharp correction from its all-time highs, also seem to be stabilizing right now. So barring gold and silver, which has seen a decline because there is no need for safe haven buying, most of the other commodities are doing well.
Okay, Manisha, thank you so much for that. So that's the latest coming in for, the world of commodities, gold prices, crude and copper is what we're keeping an eye out on as well. But that's all the time we have on this edition of Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. Thank you so much for tuning in. Up next, your Bazaar Morning Call.